The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, first 10 verses. After the Sabbath, at dawn, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and, going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now, I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid, yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly, Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me."
Thank you, Arnita. This morning at the sunrise service, we had the testimonies of the three women who came to the tomb. And since there were mainly, about a dozen or so that heard that this morning, I asked them if the three women, if they would share again. So I'd invite them to come forward and let you in on their experience, what happened to them that day.
First thing,
The three of us.
it was very damp.
There was a heavy dew.
You could see the sun rising.
We took some flowers.
I had picked them on Friday.
And we took some perfume.
We thought there would be a smell.
You know, the way corpses go.
I was scared.
It was just us.
The men wouldn't come.
They were scared like me.
We ran up the road.
We were out of breath.
But we walked through the graveyard.
We wondered about the stone.
Who would roll it away?
We should have brought them in.
And then we looked.
The stone was away.
I went in first.
I was terrified.
I never wanted to go.
There was nothing there,
There were just bandages.
Right where we had left him.
but no body.
And then we heard a voice.
But it wasn't his voice.
It said he was risen.
It said he wasn't there.
It said we had to tell the others.
So we have to go back.
But who will believe us?
They'll think we're mad.
We have to tell the others.
But they'll never believe us.
They'll say we're stupid women.
But the stone was rolled away.
And the body wasn't there.
And we did hear a voice.
And he is risen.
Thank you for bringing that to us again. That helps capture a little bit of that awesome, very hard to describe kind of experience where you have so many mixed emotions coming together, crashing together. And one of the most difficult things in those kinds of experiences, when we run into something that ends up being not like what we had expected it to be, is to try and figure out, what does this mean for us? That's one of the things that separates us from the animals, is looking for meaning. I don't know if you see your cows contemplating, what is the meaning of this day? They tend to go about their routine. Of course, we do too until we're faced with something like this. And then we do start asking questions about, what does this mean? What does it mean for somebody who had such an impact on them to all of a sudden be gone, to have been killed, executed, and very violently? And then when death comes, all of us have a pretty good feel for how final death is. That when it comes into our world, it stings. Because we have to say that final goodbye. Part of them bringing the perfumes and the spices was that part of saying their goodbyes to Jesus. Trying to give some meaning to that experience. Because death separates and death silences. There was a graveside service that I attended some years ago. At the end of the service, they had a vault for the casket that was in place, but this vault was a little bit different in that the vault was shaped a little bit more like a box with a lid, all made out of concrete. The casket was lowered into the box part. The lid was held up by some heavy chains. And after we had finished the graveside service, the attendant from the mortuary began to let those chains down to lower the lid on top of the casket. But one side came down first and the other side stuck. And so instead of it coming down flat, it came down this way, and the one side was sitting on the casket almost as though it was a hinged door. The attendant then tried to get the other chains loose. And when they came loose, the whole thing came crashing down. That concrete lid slammed onto the base. The chains came rattling down on top of it. It made all of us wince. It's just a picture of how final death is and how ugly it is. And this story that we have heard today and that the three women just testified to begins in a cemetery. Of all places, that the gospel message begins in a cemetery. And these women are witnesses of it. How many of you, when you walk through a cemetery, tend to have your thoughts focused on what was and what is, maybe what if, trying to make some kind of meaning out of what you experience? That's often where my thoughts go. When I start putting dates together, I think about what I was doing at the dates that might be imprinted on a tombstone, and sometimes you see the pictures and wonder about the person who had lived this life. A cemetery is a place where we try to assign meaning to what this whole experience is, how we live, but then we all end up dying. The Marys, in this text it says Mary and the other Mary. It's a little hard to know for sure which other Mary it was, because it could have been Mary who was the husband of Clopas, or it could have been Mary, could have been Mary, the mother of Jesus. It's hard to know. It could have been the mother of James. Now, it's possible that it would be most likely James, because that's just in the preceding text that talks about Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. So it could have been them, or that Mary. But anyway, there's multiple women that are present here. Several Marys, and one in particular, Mary Magdalene. And it is Mary that in all this chaos, Mary Magdalene especially is the one that holds this story together, which is really ironic. Where are the men? They're nowhere. Most likely, they were probably very fearful that they would be the ones to be arrested next. They would be deemed the greater threat than the women. But it is Mary's constant watching that provides a place for this story to continue. It ties the whole narrative together. They come early in the morning. Have you ever thought about what they had to sit with after Jesus was killed on Friday? And Saturday being their Sabbath, they wouldn't have been allowed to go to the grave to put on these spices and perfumes. They would have had to observe the Sabbath, a whole day of wondering about what does this mean. They couldn't even do, let's say, mindless work of some other type, working in their yard or working in their kitchen, because it was the Sabbath day, and they just had to sit with what they had experienced. So when they do finally come, they see this dramatic and supernatural angelic act, where an angel rolls the stone away and lets them know that he's not here. Other accounts in the Gospels say that they just find the tomb empty and are wondering, did somebody steal the body? And it would almost appear that even had they was seeing this angelic, supernatural rolling away of the stone, we're still kind of wondering, but did the body get stolen? If you remember me talking about the two processions last week where Rome would have brought in their soldiers into Jerusalem to try to send a message that the empire is here, please stay in line. It's the same group then that stationed soldiers, guards, besides the door beside the tomb, the stone, to make absolutely sure that the disciples didn't come and roll that stone away somehow and steal the body and then somehow pawn off a story that Jesus was alive, that he had risen from the dead. It didn't work so well, their plan. I love the language in here, how it says that the guards on the tomb, they were so frightened, they just became like dead men. They weren't any match for this angelic being that was there rolling away the stone. So their 24/7 watch, it didn't fare very well. Even in the other accounts, Mary's the one who holds it together. She doesn't go home. She returns to the tomb and she keeps watching and she keeps waiting. She wants to understand what happened when she has angels that she appear to her and say, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she says, "They've taken away my Lord and I don't know where they've laid him." And then she hears a voice, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And now this story builds another adrenaline rush. And sometimes I wonder if Jesus was having just a little bit of fun with her. I would have so much enjoyed that kind of being able to surprise someone. I don't know how Jesus would have handled that. But then when she finally realizes who it is, and Jesus calls her name Mary, she thinks it's the gardener at first, and then all of a sudden, no, it is Jesus. They didn't steal his body. He's standing right in front of her. The angel was not kidding. He is alive. And all that confusion and all that sense of loss that she's experienced got swallowed up in the delight of the resurrection, the delight of a surprise that she had no way to even imagine it happening or hoping for. That's a powerful thing when people are searching for meaning in their experiences, to have somebody else come and hope for them, to have somebody come and be a surprise for them. It's something that Jesus did with his disciples, but I believe he leaves that work to us as we continue to spread the message that he is risen. Christ is risen indeed. And do we then spread that message to our friends, to our neighbors? Do we do it in ways to say that there is hope for what you're going through? There is somebody that has provided a way for us to not only overcome the challenges in life, but to overcome death itself. There's times when people don't know how to hope for themselves anymore, and they need someone to hope for them. They need somebody to pray with them and for them. Sometimes they just need somebody to sit with them. Like the three women had each other to hold as they waited, as they mourned. And they had each other to celebrate together when they realized that Jesus was no longer dead. But people need somebody like Mary to help hold their story together. There's a story about Robert Louis Stevenson when he was a young boy. And he was intrigued by the work of the old lamplighter long before there would have been electric currents flowing down the street to bring on the lights automatically like happens now. They would have had a lamplighter who had to go down the street and light each of the lamps. And on a particularly very foggy night, as he was riding with his parents, he made this comment. He watched with fascination as he went and lit each lamp, and he said, look out there. That man is punching holes in the darkness. And Mary's first sermon, when she says Jesus is alive, that he is risen, was like that in a much bigger way. That she punched a huge hole in the darkness that everybody was living in. I have seen the Lord. She just does it in one short sentence. I've seen the Lord. He's alive. He's risen. It's hard to know what else can you say on an Easter morning. What else can you add to that message? Because this speaks to the problem that we can't ever get to go away, and it is that we all die. No matter how good we make this life, no matter how comfortable, no matter how healthy we can remain, we all eventually decline and we all die. I don't know if you noticed that they said the last known person who was born in the 1800s, the 19th century, just died. So all of those people who would have preached these kinds of Easter morning messages in the 1800s are all gone. And all the ones that heard them are all gone. We can't quite solve that issue, but this sermon from Mary pokes a huge hole in the darkness. He is risen, just as he said he would. So my challenge to us, to each one of us, as a community of faith, is celebrate this Easter day together. Celebrate this with your families. And then as you go out into your world in this next week, go poke some holes in the darkness. Pay attention to what other people are going through, where they might need to have somebody just stand with them a little, or sit with them a little, or listen to them for just a little while, or offering a prayer for them. Make the time to do it. Poke holes in the darkness. Because each one of you has that potential to be that person that helps to hold somebody else's narrative together when it's all coming apart. Each one of you can have a part in that. We need each other. We need to be able to be present with each other in the darkest hours of our lives, and perhaps in the anxiety we feel about the times we live in. We need each other. Because Jesus wants us to have the hope that comes in the resurrection and his promise to always be with us. Go and poke holes in the darkness, for Christ is risen. He's risen indeed. Would you read with me now the confession that is in the bulletin? We have been reading confessions and assurances in these last few Sundays, but this one is a confession of faith as we express this belief in Christ. O living God who raised Jesus from the dead, we shout your great victory. We sing hymns of praise.
You are faithful. You wipe away all tears, and
Teach us, O God, to trust your gracious love, to rest in your unfailing goodness, to hope in your true promise, that we may rejoice all our days and share the good news. Alleluia. Amen. Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed.